When we grieve or when we grudge, our body has a similar reaction to those things. That is, that the amygdala in our brain responds in a sense of being under threat. So what it does is it begins to throw off all of the stress chemicals that it would throw under danger. Those stress chemicals, as we know, can be a deadly mixture of cortisol and adrenaline. So that when we're grieving, when we're grudging, when we're holding on to things like that, our body then responds in ways to those stress chemicals that include things like, as cortisol hits the system, it goes immediately to our heart, so that we begin to have arrhythmic heart palpitations. It also places cortisol. We know leads to a buildup in the arteries of the heart, leading to higher risk of higher blood pressure, heart disease, a number of things when that continues to happen over time. In addition, the adrenaline under stress, the body is preparing itself to either have to fight or have to flight. It's gonna run, or it's gonna have to stay and fight. And how it's going to do that then is it has to move the blood then from the extremities of the body into the big muscles so that it prepares to run and to fight. That means then that we're going to see an increase of blood in the large muscles of the arms and the legs and the chest, and the bigger effect is where it draws blood from, and that is that as it moves blood, for instance, from the stomach, because the stomach can be a large repository of a lot of blood, then obviously it's going to, as it pulls blood out of there, now the stomach is left with just food and stomach acid without the blood to take it elsewhere. That's why you begin to have stomach problems when we grudge too long, or when we're too angry, or we're too stressed. And certainly these things are going to happen for a shorter period of time during grief. It's also then going to move blood. In order to run all of this, it has to move blood from the front part of the brain, the decision centers of our brain, and move it to the back part of the brain, the more primitive parts. And that's why when we are grieving or when we're grudging, we're experiencing periods of confusion and loss, because the blood is being redirected. I think one researcher put it well when he said basically our response to grudging and hanging on to anger, for instance, is that it leaves us stupid because the stress chemicals have moved the blood from our primary ability to make decisions in the front part of our brain and moved it to more primitive parts. We are also more prone to things like anxiety and fear, because as the blood is being moved into the chest, it's going to constrict our physical body cavity more tightly, and we begin to hyperventilate and breathe off the top part of our lungs. And when we begin to do that, we're not being able to get a full, big, deep breath. That further exacerbates the stress and the anxiety that we're moving through. And so the effect over the long run of having that kind of movement within our body, you begin to notice the physical teardown. And it can be as simple, for instance, as the depletion of serotonin in the brain, so that somebody who is not chemically or genetically disposed to having depression may become depressed, not because of the grief itself that kind of puts us there anyway, but because the physical effect of the stress chemicals over time is depleting our natural serotonin to the point where we just end up being depressed. That's why we call it more of a reactive depression. Our bodies, in the long run, were not designed to hold grudging and anger. A body in the course of grieving, and we've talked about the importance of grieving, is going to go through some battling anyway, but that's a necessary process. When it begins to be carried on too long down the road, years for instance, that begins to have a negative effect because of the hammering that our body takes on that. So it really becomes quite critical then to recognize that grieving is a critical part of healing as we move towards forgiveness. However, when we are grudging and we're holding on to anger for these injustices and unfairnesses, we're putting our body through an additional strain and struggle that it really doesn't need to be going through. And the physical effects over time of that really mean, as we've kind of said all along, that grieving and then forgiving is really more about us than it is about somebody else that may have caused an unfairness. We're taking the bigger brunt of the things that they did to us.